two, where there was something you thought you were expecting it to fail. You thought it had come, and then you move and you don't see it, and you think that the mover stole it. It's hard to keep track of everything. Hi, Mandy.
Hi.
One second, I think this is my son's school call. One. Oh. That's another pet. That was a doctor. I made an appointment with like over a month ago. Now needing to cancel. So annoying. Okay, hi Kay, hi Manny. Hello. Okay, let me just mark all of you here. And then we can get started. Midterm time, we have people missing, but I have to mark them out. 10:21. Manny is here. Usma is here. Mandy is here. And Evelyn is here. And Kay is here. Okay, great.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we'll get started. Actually, today's class might be a little short because we're finishing up individual differences. But first, I would like to go over the assignment, the brief reflection assignment, so that we're all on the same page. So let me pull up the assignment. And I posted this on D2L, so it is there. This is due on October 31st, so 10 days from now. This is, I think, in this class, this is a favorite assignment for students to do. It's not long and involved, does not necessarily involve research. It really involves reflection. And it's one of my favorite assignments to read. So let's go through it. This assignment should give you the opportunity to reflect in writing on your experience, ideas, and feelings about various aspects of language learning. So this is really focused on your own language learning. The reflection should be divided into 4 sections: backward looking, inward looking, outward looking, and forward looking. And so please give me those exact headings. In addition to your personal ideas and feelings, you should mention concepts that were discussed in class that might figure into your thinking about each of the 4 sections of the reflection. I hope that I did this. On an additional piece of paper, I have provided a list of some of the concepts we have discussed and or learned about. Feel free to choose the ones that may be helpful to you in your reflection. Let me see if I put this on this piece of paper. I did not. Okay, so I will dig that up for you so that you have it. I'm not going to tell you what to put in, but these are things that you can draw from. Okay. 2 paragraphs per section should provide your reader with ample understanding of your reflection. Please Feel free to make an outline you'll be writing in class. Oh, okay, let me ask you this. I didn't revise this, obviously. Would you guys like to do this as an in-class assignment? I don't know if that's a good idea because we only have an hour and 15 minutes. It can be done in an hour and 15 minutes, but would you prefer to take it home?
Home. I would prefer to take it home.
Okay. So what I will do is I will change this, and I apologize for not having changed it. I will change the one that I put in D2L to remove that language. Okay, so we will not do this in class. I'm going to delete this right now. And this will give more in-class time for me to get content in. So I'm going to revise it. I'm going to save it. Save it as revised. Okay. Okay, so here are the 4 sections. The first section is called backward looking. Think about your own language learning and the language learning of people you know. Discuss your experiences and thoughts on first language learning for young children. This could relate to your own early experiences or those of a young relative, neighbor, or someone you encountered in a store, on a bus, anyplace. Is first language learning miraculous or not? Why or why not? What about second language learning? What was your own experience like? Was it ESL or taking a foreign language in school? What was the approach? In other words, what was the approach of your teacher? And this is important because some people don't take foreign language until high school, but some people take it in elementary school. So go as far back as you can. My first 2 children, they were at Ray School for elementary school, a public school in Hyde Park. And they began to take foreign language, I think in either 3rd or 4th grade. But my younger children, they went to Franklin Fine Arts. It was an arts school, and they didn't have foreign language. So neither of them got foreign language until high school. So think about your own individual foreign language experience, whether it's ESL or EFL. What was the approach of your teacher? Okay, so it's not something we necessarily think about every day, but how did your teacher teach? How long did you study the language? Think about the approaches and methods that we talked about at the beginning of the course, or anything else that comes to mind. Did you learn more than one additional languages? Tell me about that and tell us about it. So the second section is called inward looking. How did you respond to your second language learning? How did you feel about your language learning at the time? Why? What do these feelings reveal about you as a language learner? Did your ideas about language learning or foreign languages change because of your experience, and how? Okay. So really think about this. This is like trying to get in touch with how you felt in class, how you felt out of class, how you felt doing homework. Was it useful? Right? I remember that I took foreign language in 2nd grade, and then I didn't take it again until 6th grade. I took it in 2nd grade, I took French. And I remember it being fun. I looked forward to it. And that wasn't because it was French, that was because of the teacher. She made it fun. She was a much older woman. At the time, I thought she was probably 90 years old, but looking back on it, she was probably in her 50s or 60s. But there were a lot of songs and things. And then in sixth grade, actually, sixth grade was my first time in public school. And I was lucky to have Spanish. And I really did like it. I don't know that it made me good at speaking it. So anyway, that's my journey. I have a lot more to talk about that in Spanish. I learned a lot more Spanish. I could write Spanish and read it, but it wasn't until I started working in Spanish Harlem that I really could speak it in a comfortable way. Okay. Part 3 is outward looking. In what ways were you different from or similar to your peers? What had you wished your language teachers noticed about you as a student or as a person? And why? What advice would you now give to yourself if the current day you, oh, okay. Thank you, Amelia. What advice would you now give to yourself if the current day you could speak to the past student you? Why do you give this advice? And then forward looking. If you were to take a language class now, are there any characteristics you would like to see in the course, the classroom, or the pedagogy structure? And that has to do with the way the course is taught. What are they? Why would you make these choices? Would you approach language learning differently now? What kind of a teacher will you be for English language learning? As a teacher in the future, what qualities will you look for in your future employer? This is important. And you want to think in terms of their policies around language, either foreign language or ESL practices, and why would you be looking for these things? Okay? Any questions about this very fun assignment? Okay, so I will post the revised assignment in D2L. It is due again on the 31st by 11:59 p.m. I think that's next Sunday, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, so let me mark payment late. That was Hannah and Amanda. Okay. Good to see you, Hannah and Amanda. Okay. Pull up the PowerPoint. Okay, so we did that already. The brief self-reflection due on the 31st. And then you have something due in a few days, right? I know you're working on that. Are there any questions about that assignment? So they're literally a week apart from each other. Okay, so before I continue on individual differences, I'm going to show 2 short videos. One is called Hacking Language Learning. It's a TED Talk. And the other is actually about individual differences. We already talked about individual differences, but I'm going to spell out some additional dimension of this topic. Okay, so you know, and you can refer to things you see on the videos also in your brief self-reflection.
When I was 21 years old, I could only speak English, which is typical for those of us from English-speaking countries. And I had many reasons why this was going to be the case for me for the rest of my life. And I was very confident of this because I had no natural talent. I had a very bad memory. I couldn't travel to the country yet. I was too old. I felt too old. And I was sure that I was going to frustrate the native speakers and embarrass myself. And on top of this, in school, I did really poorly with languages. So I did actually get the opportunity to get into languages after I graduated university with a degree in electronic engineering, still only able to speak English. I moved to Spain and I figured this is it. This is going to solve my problems living in the country. No, 6 months later of living in Spain, couldn't speak any Spanish. Now, a sensible person would have given up at this stage, gotten the point. I'm not very sensible though. So I figured if I change my approach and change my attitude, maybe I can change my language skills. And what happened to inspire me to get into language learning was I met a polyglot. A polyglot is someone who can speak many languages. And the first time you meet someone like that, you can't help but feel really impressed. Like, for instance, there's Richard from the UK, and there's one video online where he speaks 16 languages. Let me just show you a little clip here. You can see him.
Je parle français et anglais avec ma fille.
Speak French,
Macedonian,
Czech, and Catalan, which is pretty impressive. And we also have Luca from Italy. And here you can hear him speak in German, Portuguese. We also have Susanna, who goes through here her
Comunque per me è faticoso
Italian,
parlare in italiano in New York,
and her Russian. And a very impressive video I saw once, this 16-year-old from America called Tim goes through 20 languages in one video. And in this part here, you can see him go through Wolof, Yiddish, Hebrew, Arabic, Turkish, Swahili, and Hindi. So, wow. I met someone like this and I was so impressed. I thought to myself, you know, I want to be like that. But the reason I wanted to be like that is because I wanted people to think I'm smart, to be impressed with me. And I met this polyglot at the start of my time in Spain. And with this very superficial motivation, just because it would be cool to learn a language, I failed. So what I discovered after those 6 months is one of the biggest problems we have in language learning, but we don't know it. And that's motivation. A lot of us start with the wrong motivation to learn a language. We're learning the language just to pass an exam, to improve our career prospects, or in my case, for superficial reasons to impress people. And what I found is those polyglots I've just shown you in the video, the reason they're learning the language is because they're passionate about that language. They're passionate about the literature and the movies and being able to read in a language and of course to use it with people. And when I changed that priority of using the language with people, I was able to learn the languages myself. But there are a lot of things that people feel would not allow them to learn language. So I want to go through, I think there's 5, I asked a lot of people, there's 5 major reasons they never get into language learning. So let me go through some of these here. The first is they've no language gene or talent. No language gene or talent. Well, what does that mean? I mean, sometimes this is actually just a self-fulfilling prophecy. In my case, when I hadn't learned language growing up, or the 6 months of failed learning Spanish, it was just me telling myself I don't have the language gene, so there's no point really doing any work in the language, because I didn't put the work in. I didn't learn the language. It's just a vicious circle. It's all in your head. There's no language gene. We all have it already. But let's just imagine some people that would do better, because we've seen in school people advance faster than the rest of the crowd. So let's say there's some inborn trait that gives someone a 20% advantage over the rest of the people. Good for them. That doesn't mean that you can't. It just means you have to work 20% harder. And I found that, at least in my case, when I work harder, I can catch up with the naturally talented and even overtake them. So not having talent is not a good excuse. The next reason is that you're too old to learn a second language. And I certainly felt this myself, because up to 21, I didn't learn a language. And a lot of us feel that children their brains are hardwired to learn languages better. But is it really neurology at play here, or could it be the environment in which the child is learning the language? Well, a study at the University of Haifa in Israel actually found that under the right conditions, adults are better language learners than children. It sounds incredible, but it's about your environment. It's about your motivation. It's about the enthusiasm and encouragement you get from other people. And when you think of it, adults tend to be studying dusty old grammar books and doing boring exercises, whereas children are playing in the language, having fun in it. So I found that when I changed this to live through the language, not making it about studying the language, but living the language, then I was much more successful. So you're not too old to learn language. I've met people in their 60s starting to learn language and being successful with that. The next excuse people would have is that they can't travel to the country right now. Now, maybe 20 years ago, this would have been a valid excuse. But nowadays, the world is smaller than you think. Thanks to the internet, we can connect with native speakers from across the planet. And you'll see that in a lot of cases, they might want to learn your language. And then money isn't even an issue, because you teach them a little and they teach you a little. But even forgetting the internet for a moment, a lot of us live in cities or towns that are more international than what we think. And when I was traveling in America, I made it to Columbus, Ohio, of all places, to meet this very interesting polyglot called Moses. And he does what he likes to call leveling up, where he'll go to some public place and just see if he can find some foreigners and practice the language with them. And I joined him when we went to a mall in Columbus, and the two of us managed to practice 12 langues. And just here in this clip, you can see Cantonese. And it's Cambodia. And you can see the guy really appreciated him trying. So you can learn a language anywhere. And I wanted to push this to the limit. My most recent project, I went to the middle of Brazil, of all places, to learn Egyptian Arabic. And I succeeded because even though there were no Egyptians around me, I got on Skype and I talked for 1 or 2 hours a day, and I managed to go up towards conversation level. So no, not being able to travel to the country is not a good excuse. The next one people might give is they've got bad memory for learning all that vocabulary. And this was certainly what I felt, because when I first tried to learn Spanish, I'd get a big list of words. I try to go through them and I forget them very quickly. But research on memory capacity has found that it's better when you revise these words with the right frequency. And there's this technique called spaced repetition, where you learn the word, you revise the word just before you would forget it. And it looks something like this forgetting curve. The red line is what typically happens when you first see a word, but to get it into your head and stuck there permanently, then just review it to make sure it goes, like review it 1 day later, then a week later, and then a month later. And there are apps on your smartphone, and there's free programs you can download that help you time all of this. So that's great, but you can you can learn the words faster and better if you combine this with an image association technique. So for instance, let's say I wanted to learn that the Spanish word for to fit is caber. Well, what if I imagine then that it's barely possible to fit a bear in a cab? Caber is to fit. So you do this for a lot of words, and it actually gets very easy with time, and you can learn vocabulary instantly. So no, having a bad memory is not a good excuse. Next, and I think the most important one that people always say is that they're going to frustrate native speakers. And this is just so not true. I've been to many places, I've spoken to many people, and every time I attempt to use their language, they're overjoyed. They're so pleased that I'm even trying. And I just feel like, especially adults, when we learn a language, we're such perfectionists. We want everything to be just right. And perfectionism is a really bad thing in language learning, because a language is a means of communication. It's a way to get to know new people and new cultures. And when you embrace this, it's okay to make mistakes. And I actually have a goal to make at least 200 mistakes a day, because then I know I'm getting somewhere, I'm using the language. So embarrass yourself, go out there, talk to people, it's okay. When do you think I was learning a language better? Here or here? So anyone can indeed learn a language when you use with people, and it's okay to use it early. And this is so important, that you don't have to wait until you speak the language perfectly and fluently and so on. You can get into it sooner than you'd expect. And it opens up so many doors to these other cultures. So for instance, after I'd learned that Arabic in Brazil, I made it to Egypt, and I made it all the way deep into the Sahara Desert. I sat down in the sand with an Egyptian, and I had some tea. We had this nice little chat here.
ده انت كتير صغير كتير مش مصر ايوه مصر كبيره.
And there I'm just saying that Egypt is so vast, so great. It's so much more than just Tahrir Square in Cairo. And now when I was speaking with them, I used the wrong word here and there, and I conjugated the wrong verb every now and again. That's okay, because even with this conversational level, I had this fascinating conversation with them. And I've done this with other cultures and other languages. I even managed to learn a little American Sign Language. And here you can see, Juliana had asked me, why didn't I learn Irish Sign Language? And I said, because when I'm in Ireland, I like to improve my Irish or my Gaeilge, which I can then speak here. So that was me on Irish radio saying about my travels and whatever. And I learned Irish for 10 years in school, and I wasn't able to say the most basic phrases after that. But as an adult, I went back to Ireland and I embraced using the language as a beginner. And that helped me to reach this stage. And it's okay to be a beginner. It's okay to be conversational. But when you take this on, take it to the next level, then you can reach very well. I mean, I've got very good level in French, Spanish, a couple of languages. I've worked as a professional translator, and like here I'm having a quick
Parfois,
chat
j'ai
in French.
passé une heure pour trouver une traduction.
Ah oui, bien sûr.
And that's great. That's what everybody thinks of when they're getting into language learning. They think, that's what I want to be. I want to be at this very high professional level, have deep philosophical conversations. And that's fantastic. And yeah, it's impressive when you see people like that. But rather than be impressive, I think it's so much better when you embrace the beginning stage of language learning. And one of the most amazing experiences I've had was when I was in China on the train, 2,000 kilometers deep into China, and I had a basic conversation of what's your name? And it turned out I was given my Chinese name there on the train. And look, this is how it went. What's your name? I'm Benny. I don't have a Chinese name. And then Li Hui says, I'll tell you what, your name is Billy. Because this sounds like your normal name, and it means ability or skill. And you know, I could have that conversation even with a basic conversation level of Chinese. And I do have the ability, I do have the skill to learn language, but I always did. We all always do. And the reason I have this skill is not because I was born with it and others weren't. It's a decision I made. And the problem a lot of us face is we feel that we're better studying and preparing for speaking a language someday. Because if we do it too early, the world would end from all this frustration we cause people. There are 7 days in a week, and someday is not one of them. I say, rather than see if the world will end, a whole new world can begin if you try to learn a new language. So I hope you give it a try. Thank you. None of this, because I had no.
Okay, it's pretty amazing. So some takeaways. I don't know if there's anything that came to mind as you were watching, either about your own experiences in the past or, you know, your goals in the future, or what kind of teacher you'll be. Anything come to mind?
I feel like he made a really good point about saying even as adults we can still learn a language as long as we put in the effort and just wanting to actually learn the language. I found that interesting.
Yeah, I'm glad that he made that point, because too often in linguistics and in TESL, we talk about the critical period because it's much harder after age 13 and a half to learn a language. And we know that's true, but we also know that when you're an adult and you're highly motivated and you're willing to take risks, it goes really, really well. So Amanda, I totally agree.
I like the second point where he said that, where he was talking about you're too old to learn a language, because my dad, he took English classes at a community college. He wanted to learn the language. And my mom, on the other hand, she only speaks Spanish. She knows a few words in English, but she can't make like a sentence, say a sentence, like a proper sentence.
Wow. So how old was your dad when he took the classes, do you know?
So he started taking classes when my older sister was born. So he was like around 30. Because he wanted to be able to communicate with like school teachers and everything when we got older, like when my sister got older.
So there was that motivation there. And so now is he fluent?
I say he is. He still has some trouble saying like verb tense.
Okay.
Or like finding the correct word of like, oh, what the,
but
how do you
it's
say
not,
that?
it's not really a barrier to understanding what he's trying to say. So that's beautiful.
Yeah, you can understand, and if you talk to him, he can make a conversation and like make a joke sometimes.
So that's like interesting to think about. Like, you have two wonderful parents. One made the decision to learn and one didn't. So like, I wonder how they're different. You know, you can think about, I wonder what made one go down this trajectory and the other another. It's fascinating. It has to do with individual differences. That's a great example.
And my mom, she says that excuse that she's too old to learn English.
So, so the motivation is not there. And she probably has found that she can do what she needs to do in society, of course, with the support of husband and children who speak English. So she's made a calculation. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. So something he said struck a chord in me. He was talking about, and it was kind of funny, the word association with the bear in the cab, like to remember Caber. And I used to have those kind of pictures in my mind that helped me to remember words in other languages. And I said, I wonder, when I was teaching ESL to adults at El Centro 9 years ago, I said, I wonder if this would work with them. And I decided to try it because they were having a whole lot of trouble with he and she. And these are people with multiple mother tongue. Asian, and I can't remember what level it was. It wasn't level 3. It was either level 1 or 2. And there were Spanish speakers too. There was maybe 4 or 5 different languages. And most of them, for some reason, had trouble with he and she. So they would say she when they meant he, and he when they meant she. And I wish I had a blackboard here, but just picture the word he and picture the word she. The S in she looks more like a woman, and the H in he looks more like a man. And guess what? That worked. Maybe it's not politically correct. I don't know, but it worked. They made fewer mistakes with he and she. The other thing is that, think about what he said about making mistakes. Like, it's actually his goal to make 20 mistakes in language a day. Think about whether your language teachers encourage mistakes. That's actually a good thing, to encourage mistakes, because what you're really doing is encouraging risk-taking. It's hard to learn a language if you're not taking risks. So think about that. And think about whether your teachers encourage that, or how they, or even more importantly, how they responded to mistakes. Oh, and I had one question for you. He said that he learned from Ireland and he learned Irish throughout school. So why do you think that he didn't really learn Irish until he was an adult? What do you think about that?
I believe, like I said before with this theory, he probably didn't have the motivation to actually learn the language. He probably didn't really care, even though kids at that age can grasp a language earlier than usual. So I think it's just because he didn't have the motivation to learn, or he didn't really care to grab another language.
Okay, interesting. Ireland is an English-speaking country, but I don't know how many of you know this, but Ireland was a colonial property of England. So basically, England forced Ireland to use English, just like so many European countries have forced their language on other countries, especially places like Spain, France, and England. So it's interesting that he's Irish, but yet he has to learn it in school. And I wonder how it was taught. He's in Ireland, he's Irish, but he didn't learn it in school. So we can, go ahead, Evelyn.
I was gonna say maybe it could have been his classmates too. Like they encourage English, so maybe he put more attention to his English than Irish. Or Irish, yeah.
Yeah, so he calls it Irish, and I think really he's talking about Gaelic. But so you bring up something important that I hadn't thought of. Countries that have been colonies, that have been victims of imperialism, are also sometimes brainwashed to think that the language of their imperial power is better. So what you said just made me think about that, and I hadn't thought about that. So it could be a combination of that and the style of teaching based on his age and the fact that he grew up in Europe leads me to believe that he was taught in the grammar translation style, which is basically just reading and writing. Does that really teach you to use the language? Not really. So luckily he's a risk taker. So as an adult, he was motivated, like you say, and he took risks to actually learn the language. Okay, we're going to see this quick video and then I'm going to tackle the new content. Oh, I think I have to pull it down. Give me a second. Let's see if it works here. Ah, yeah.
Module 11, Individual Learner Differences. Learners in one classroom are both similar and at the same time different. A learner-centered approach to teaching requires teachers to understand this duality and to be aware of the different ways in which students learn. Some differences may be easier to see or discover, such as age, gender, socioeconomic conditions, and level of education. Other differences may be more difficult to identify, including overall cognitive ability or intelligence and cognitive development in younger learners, learners' language proficiency levels, and their motivation for language study, learners' personality traits, along with their learning strengths, styles, and preferences. Module focus, introduction. The focus in Module 11 is on how teachers can vary teaching approaches and techniques to help facilitate learning for a wide variety of students. They can vary the type of language input along with the content and the medium of delivery. They can vary learner tasks. They can teach learning strategies. They can help students take responsibility for their own learning, and they can use group work appropriately. Number 1, viewing points for students using different skills. Video segment number 1. In this classroom, the students have chosen a popular song to work on and learn. Here they are demonstrating the results of their work. Look for how the class is organized, different activities that the students do, language and other skills that students are using, and an overall learning and teaching strategy.
Today, I tell about my friend experience. I have heard my friend talk about her boyfriend. She got along with Snoop for a year. My group is drawing about this song. This song is about the girl. She has fallen in love with one man, but she can't tell him about her love. She prays every night and she wants him to her boyfriend. Oh my lovely, lovely boy, I miss. Oh my lovely, lovely boy, I do. Let me inside, make me say, life inside you. Thank you very much.
Summary. This was a large class. Students worked in groups. Each group had a different activity. One group wrote and acted out a music video. One wrote a personal story that was similar to the story in the song. One group drew a picture about the song and explained it. And one group changed the words of the song. They were using listening, speaking, reading, writing, music, drawing, and drama skills. One strategy the teacher used was to make students aware they were using the song to learn English vocabulary. Number 2, viewing points, learning stations, and self-access rooms. Video segment number 2. Another way to meet the needs of individual learning differences is to set up learning stations or a self-access area or room. Some reasons for a self-access area are so that learners can have choices and they can work at their own pace, so that learners can have access to a variety of materials and do different tasks, so that learners can work together on projects and activities, and so that the teacher can have more time to work with small groups or individuals.
SEAR stands for Student English Access Room. So this is the room for encourage students to come and practice more skills of English, like speaking, listening, reading, and writing. This is the project from all the project are Matrium 5, because I teach Matrium 5, and they work in groups like this. Normally, I cannot remember the name of the students, so they put their faces on this, like this. This is the Taco herbs. Yes, Taco is the name of the trees that our school focus on, these Taco herbs. And this is the name of them, and then we plan and then use it to run it with the student bit by bit, day by day, years by years, and up until now. They can produce it very, very good. At first, they need to plan. I use 10 steps from Storer and then let them understand. I have 4 stages of using project work teaching. The first one, I just introductory by let them understand the project work, and then I use the example project for them. The first example for me is smoking project, to let them know that smoking is not good, to let them get the information, and then they can analyze the information, and then they conclude and present it to the class. After that, I control them to make the project of smoking. After that, they will do it by my help. According to my help, they do the project 1. And then after that, they can do it by themselves with their interest for project 2. And they develop until now. They can do it by integrated how to run the project to other subjects, like Tago is for the botany and herbs is for science. So they can run this and get the point for me, and then they can ask for another score from another ajahn in their subjects. This is the name of the project, and they have the brochure to present. This is to present for the brochure. They do it by themselves, but with my help with the language. But it is a lot of students. I teach about maybe 25 groups to do this. So it wastes a lot of time to change, to develop the language. This is the transparency for them to get the information and then present to the class. When evaluation, not only me, but they themselves, they can evaluate themselves and their friends too. And sometimes I let the parents to come and have a look at their kids' project. After the 3rd years, they can have a lot of examples to have a look. I just guide them to have a look at the examples. Yes, and when they get the information, they present this to show that it is the real thing to do.
Notice the different sections or areas of this self-access room and the kinds of resources that are available. There is a schedule to help students determine when they can use different areas of the room. This room can be used for independent study or for group work. A similar but smaller self-access area can also be created in one corner of a classroom, or even on a cart that moves from class to class. Teachers can gradually develop areas or carts as time and the availability of materials allow. Workstations are another way to support individual learning differences. Students can work together or individually at a station. Using workstations can give the teacher time to work with one group while other groups are working on something else. Workstations can also give students the opportunity to manipulate things to help them learn, which is a different kind of learning.
See, these two are track. Did you see that? Can you show this to everybody? See, so these.
At one station, students put together a brain puzzle as part of learning about its parts and their functions. Another way to learn is to use the world outside the classroom. For this project, students counted all the different animals they saw in their neighborhoods. Then, at one of their workstations, they combined that information into a graph. Summary. Self-access centers or areas and workstations give learners choices. They allow learners to work at their own pace. They provide access to a variety of materials and opportunities to do different tasks. They provide materials for working together on projects and activities, and they provide time for the teacher to work with individuals or groups. Module focus. Summary. The focus in Module 11 has been on individual learning differences. Teachers can vary approaches and techniques to help facilitate learning for a wide variety of learners when they vary the type of language input along with the content and the medium of delivery. They vary learner tasks. They teach learning strategies. When they help students take responsibility for their own learning and when they use group work appropriately.
Okay, let me stop sharing this. So the purpose of that was not only to get you to think about your own experiences in the past, but to think about what you might want to plan for or include as a teacher in the future, especially with English language learners. So some of the things that they mentioned was students working at their own pace, being able to make choices, workstation groups, hands-on, creation of whatever materials, tactile work, presentations that get you the speaking practice, but it's not the only way to get the speaking practice. You can think out of the box for that. It is a good way of presentation. The evaluation, students' evaluation of themselves and their peers, and then keeping learning styles in mind. Now that you know your own learning styles, I looked on there, not everyone chimed in, and I know it was my fault I didn't have the question up on the discussion board at first. So if you haven't chimed in on the discussion board about your learning style and your multiple intelligence, please still do that. There's, I think, only 7 people, 10 in the class. Okay, So let me, oh my God, it's 2:37. This is terrible. The class goes by too fast. Let's see here. I probably won't get to do all of what I had planned, but some of it at least. Okay, so question to you, what do you think are the major factors in success in language learning? Just shout out some factors. What makes a language learner successful? What are some of the things? And we're talking about that individual, whether it's a child or an adult. What qualities help them to be a good language learner?
Confidence.
Confidence. Confidence helps. It does. That's a good one. Who said that?
Me, Amanda.
Okay, good.
Risk taking.
Risk taking, that's a biggie. Because without being a risk taker, you're really not willing to make mistakes. Confidence, risk taking, good.
Being able to practice it.
Yes. So sometimes it's a matter of scouting out or realizing that you're in a setting where you can practice. Like, you always have to be cognizant of that. I'm standing at the bus stop, there's two other people standing there. Take advantage of that moment. That's a good one. Give me two more.
Motivation.
Okay, so yes, motivation. And the motivation might be for a child, it might be wanting to fit in, depending on the age of the child, right? Or it may be wanting to please the teacher. Or it may be because you know you'll get that promotion if you improve your English. Yes, motivation is big. One more, give me one more.
Being resourceful.
Okay, yes. Being resourceful. That is key.
Yeah, so like finding the right resources to actually learn the new language.
Right, because the resources aren't necessarily going to walk up to you, right?
Yeah.
So yes, scouting out those resources, being a kind of like entrepreneur. Those are really good. So Rubin and Thompson back in 1982 said that good language learners, one, take charge of their own learning and seek out opportunities to use the language. Okay, we've said that. Two, are unafraid to creatively experiment with the language and make intelligent guesses. And that I think has to do with risk taking. The first one might have to do with resourcefulness. Three, learn chunks of language and conversational phrases to help them perform beyond their competence. Now, this is important because actually, when we get good at a language, it's not because we learned a series of words and memorized them and know how to pronounce them. It's because we've learned phrases, common phrases, chunks that are useful and are impressive. And actually, this is something that I have done with Spanish. And I used to be more conversational with Spanish when I was around it more. Now that I'm not around it as much, I still maintain those phrases, although I've lost, I don't want to say I've lost Spanish. I'm not nearly as good. I don't have as wide of a vocabulary. It doesn't come as readily to me, but I still have those chunks. And I remember my cousin got married in Mexico. This was in I think it was either 2019 or 2018. My first time in Mexico, and we were in the airport, and there was going to be a man picking us up. And you know how people are holding up the sign? And I saw my name. My husband and I were together. We saw our last name posted. And I went up to the man and I started using these phrases that I know. And he ran away with it and started speaking to me really fast. And I was like, oh no, no. Because I was beyond my competence. I appeared to know more than I knew. And sometimes that's good because it gets you further. Number 4, good language learners, they monitor themselves. They don't just, so not only are they risk takers, but they monitor their use of language and they take note of the mistakes they make. So they're not only willing to make the mistakes, they take note of the mistakes. They allow errors to work from them and they learn from their mistakes. Okay, so these are things that that we've talked about. Okay, so learning styles mediate between emotion and cognition. Okay, we start out with emotion. Our learning style gets in the way, and that could be good and that can be bad. The learning style mediating either facilitates the learning of language and the use of language, or it does the opposite. So besides visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or multiple intelligences, here are a few more styles that, thanks to research, are understood. Field independence versus field dependence. And I think you guys took this test, right? Did you take this inventory, or did I just give you the learning styles and the multiple intelligence?
I think we took that. Yeah, we took it.
Oh, okay, that's what I thought. Yeah, so this is one that's not always talked about. Like when you're learning about an individual topic that might be narrow, does it help for you to have context? Or do you do fine without context? I usually need context, but not everyone does, okay? So sensitivity to context or not. Are you a random thinker, which is non-linear? A lot of artistic people think like this. Their thoughts are here and here and here. I don't know if you can see. But a sequential thinker, their thinking is linear, right? They think in an organized way. If A, then B. If B, then C. If not C, then E, right? So I have trouble knowing which one I am because I feel like I'm in the middle. I think I'm closer to being a sequential thinker though. And I don't have time to really go into detail about each of these, but I'll post this PowerPoint and so you can look into it further. Are you a global, big picture thinker? Are you focused more on detail? For me, I know for a fact, I'm more of a global, big picture person. But what happens to mediate this is that I'm a teacher. And so I know because of my profession, I need to pay attention to detail. So my profession mediates my tendency to be only global, right? Am I inductive or deductive? Do I learn better when I'm given the rules first, or when I have to figure out the rules for myself? I haven't decided which one I am. I actually like both. Are you a concrete thinker where you pay attention to the physical, to the literal? When someone says something, do you always take them literally? Or are you more of an abstract thinker where when you're presented with abstract concepts, you do well? Are you an impulsive thinker or a reflective thinker? An impulsive thinker reacts, right? And that's really actually good for language learning. A reflective thinker wants to take the time to think about something and turn it over in their mind. That's helpful with everything, But sometimes with language, it can slow you down a little bit, right? Some things we have to memorize, like grammar rules. We do have to be reflective about grammar rules. But then at some point, we have to go out and take the risk and be a little impulsive and be willing to make mistakes. Are we left brain or are we right brain, which I'm about to talk about? Are you tolerant of ambiguity? Are you ambiguity intolerant? So in other words, if someone presents you with an idea that's ambiguous is a little different than abstract. So ambiguous has to do with something that's presented to you that can either mean this or that, right? It can mean two different things. I actually welcome that. I'm tolerant because I like to figure things out. I'm not a puzzle person. I hate jigsaw puzzles, but if you present me with something ambiguous, it's kind of philosophical, and I like to do that. Some people do not like anything ambiguous. They're like, give it to me straight. Okay. So I can't go through all of these, but I want to talk about left brain, right brain dominance. So if you're left brain dominant, your thinking is associated with logic and analysis. You think logically and you think analytically if your left brain is dominant. If your right brain or your right hemisphere, as they call it, is dominant, perceives and remembers visual, tactile, and auditory images. So you go to an art museum, you remember those paintings, but not only do you remember the painting, you remember how you toured the museum, which turns you took, what you touched. You remember the conversations that you heard, right? You're very holistic, but you hold on to that holistic and that emotional information. So you can think about that. Are you left brain? Are you right brain? Are you somewhere in the middle? And if you're somewhere in the middle, are you leaning towards left or right brain? So reflexivity, being reflective versus being impulsive. Children who are conceptually reflective tend to make fewer errors in reading. Okay. Impulsive learners, and this has to do with reading and other subjects, they're quicker and they take risks. They make more mistakes, but they also learn from their mistakes. So with each of these categories, there's not one that's better or worse. In the end, someone said motivation is important. If you're motivated, that motivation can mediate these things. Okay. I won't go any further today. Let me come out of this. And so I'm going to send you the online instructions for next week. And I must say that I think I made a mistake in the schedule. And I'm going to email you about the mistake. I meant for November 4th to be remote, not remote, but to be online. So we may have 2 weeks in a row like this. And the reason being is I'm going to be traveling for my child who's applying to colleges. So there may be 2 weeks that I need to change. One I know is November 4th. So I will email you about this, and I'm so sorry if it's confusing, but I'll clarify it in an email. Are there any questions? Lost a couple people. Okay. Thank you so much, and please reach out to me if there are any questions about the assignment or anything else. I'll be checking my email. Okay?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good
Thank
weekend.
you. Be safe. Be safe.
Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank you. You too.